everybody, again. I'm thrilled to introduce from the film Seberg, we have actress Kristen Stewart. And the director Benedict Andrews.
Are you in front? And straight, please. Stay on. In the middle.
Okay.
Smile.
No one ever says that to me.
Okay, thank you. And as we said, no more flash. And if you'd like to go to the back. So, thank you so much for being in Zurich. Congratulations
Thank you.
on the film. I'll start with a few questions and then we'll open it up to our colleagues from the press out there.
Should we use his mic?
So, Benedict, to start with you, I had never heard of Jean Seberg. I knew some of her work, but I had never heard about this part of her life. How did you discover it and why did you want to make a film about it?
I think I had a similar experience to you, and also I think to many people approaching this story. She existed in my imagination as a kind of flickering, joyous image of liberation from her performance in Bout de Souffle, and I'd seen that film when I was 16 years old, and then that had, I don't know where, she had become a kind of saint in my imagination, or an icon from that, and she always burned there, and I had that experience that you happen with those type of performances where you somehow feel you know that person, which I think great performances do. I felt I knew her, but I didn't know of this kind of corner of her life and this couple of years of her life until I read the script by Anna Waterhouse and Joe Shrapnel. And I really, from reading that script, I immediately became interested in this hidden area of her life, but also through the proposition they had in the script to show both the watcher and the watched. Like they had also invented the Jack Solomon character who is watching Jean in the film, and I was particularly fascinated by this looking at Jean through the man who looks at her, and to see both sides of surveillance, of a surveillance operation. And in Jean's story, I was fascinated with the question of what happens when an actress, somebody who has to live their life in public, and for their job has to kind of live in a glass house of exposing themselves to the public in situations like this, but also to do their job and to be truthful, expose their innermost secrets, to go into the hidden places that as human beings we're taught to keep hidden. It's the actor's job to go in front of the camera or to go onto the stage and reveal those things. And in Jean's story, we see that place become invaded and violated, and a kind of battleground. Her private space becomes the battleground where the FBI is waging its war against change in America. And I was very much interested in her as that intersection, and how do you survive that? What happens?
And Kristen, when you read the script, what were your immediate thoughts that interested you, and did you also have any trepidation about playing a famous actress who we all think we know?
The things that we know about her were the most intimidating, and the things that we don't were the most intriguing. There are only a few instances where we represent her in a way that I can be compared to. Other than that, it is a sort of imaginative idea of what it felt like to be under that surveillance, and even there's not like too much to ingest when it comes to reference. There's like a couple of interviews, only one or two of which is on camera, and the other imagery we have of her is either still or in film. The most interesting thing for me was, I guess, just knowing what what we know now but didn't know then, and watching her films and how they kind of how available and kind of turned on she is in the beginning of her career compared to sort of like the effort in which it took to excavate herself in her later roles was obviously tremendous, and still she was kind of like remote. It just feels like you want so much more from her, and you wonder like where she's going. And the cool thing about this movie is that you kind of see now why she had to protect herself and like really self-preserve. And so yeah, like I wanted to not only play around with things that we know as people that like movies. If you've seen Breathless, like that was the only way that I knew her initially. And so obviously the initial draw was that that's an exciting person to play, because she is this infectious, really like present kind of like firecracker of an actress that we all love. But then like to know these details is like so crazy that it's not a prevalently known thing. So yeah, to help tell her story and kind of like, because I'm sure it would be the story that she would have wanted to really tell and never got the chance to.
Yeah, I mean, it feels scarily relevant now, just the issues of privacy, people sort of under media scrutiny as well. I mean, why do each of you think it's an interesting time now to tell her story again?
It's you know, as we started to work on it in a way, like, unfortunately, over the years of even making the movie, it's become even more relevant. Even over the weeks that we've been out with the movie every day, the sort of the whistleblower aspect of the story with Jack feels like that's really in our faces at the moment too. That question, if you have a truth and that truth is something that will put you in jeopardy and run the risk of destroying your career and your family and your freedom, but you believe that truth needs to be told so much, will you do it? As Jack does in quite a private way to Jean. He feels he's the only person who can give her the truth that he needs, in the final scene does that. But so many of the things in the movie, it feels like 1968, 69 is becoming 50 years later an echo chamber for 2019. Jean says in the movie at one point, you know, this country is at war with itself. You see the kind of powder keg of race relations in America, and of race institutionalized racism in America. But I think even more fundamentally, the movie concentrates on this question of how power uses or creates lies, manipulates truth in order to silence dissidents, in order to control, and in order to kind of smash activism.
And just sustain itself.
Yeah, absolutely. To sustain its bloated system, and we see that happening and playing out as a kind of like ubu wa or something every day in the current American regime. But what I think we see in the movie is where an analog surveillance culture, kind of in its DNA or in its infancy, that has grown up to be the culture of surveillance that we now live in. But I was also concerned in showing the human cost of that on Jean, the human cost of that on the Hakim Jamal and his family and their work, but also in a way on to show the mechanisms of that in how it looks at the processes of the FBI, and this Jack character having a kind of awakening from being a young soldier in a dirty war to realizing he's involved in something that is creating lives and damaging someone.
And Kristen, for you, why does it feel so relevant today, this story?
Well, I mean, I think in like a lot of ways, I think, like I was just saying, like I think we're allowed now through things that are really kind of predominantly criticized by seekers of truth, which is like social media, things that actually I think really connect us in a way that is profound and significant and so vital. Like this woman was not, they weren't available to her. So she was just never able to be honest about things that were so clearly true. And it's like there are aspects of her fight and her activism that are obviously still so debilitatingly still in effect now. And I think the language and the vocabulary like surrounding those issues have changed. Like we're a little bit more aware of them and a little bit less at the same time. Like we think that we've gotten past things that we just haven't. And I don't know. I think we never really know that what we're consuming is true. That's something that we're struggling with now. But from an individual perspective, there are people that are able to make themselves heard. And we're hearing her story that was so impactful now in a way that we never got then. So I think that the work that she put in at that time is just becoming available to us. And that is such a gift to be able to serve.
Yeah. I'd like to open it up to some of my colleagues here. Okay, we can start right.
Okay.
Oh, we got a mic. Thanks.
I have a question for Kristen. What means fame to you compared to those things? And how do you keep your privacy private?
I don't know. I don't really think about it. Like I don't keep my privacy private. It's weird because my job sort of entails giving the most intimate parts of myself, regardless of like detail. I'm in this wonderful position where I get to like share not the details of my life, but like my life, like my existence with other people. Being an actor is just letting people into your sort of maybe it's not day to day, but letting people into you, just like your existence. I don't know. I don't. Fame to me is like I get to talk to you guys about movies that I think are important when I work on them, and I don't know. That's it.
Okay. There's a question in the corner of the sofa, and then we'll go to the back, and then up front.
Hi, and you were talking about something very interesting about the perceptions people have on being perfect through social media. How do you feel you are contributing to the film? Are you applying what you were doing in the film in your personal life? Am I clear, or is that too profound or complicated?
I mean, I don't know if I'm going to interpret it correctly, like as you intended, but I don't have social media, so I'm lucky enough to not require it as a means to connect and feel less alone. I'm lucky to be able to interact with artists that I'm working with intimately, and also on a larger, more public scale. Like I have this enormous gaping avenue in order to express myself, so I don't feel like I need it. So I don't know. Like my interaction with that is kind of limited, but I see how important it is for some people to be able to have that. Luckily, I just don't.
Okay, can we hear Mike? Great.
My name is Vadim, college from Hungary, and this movie for me partly was about what Hollywood star is allowed or not allowed to talk about. Can you speak about, or she speak about political issues or not? And of course nowadays we still see stars who are honest to the press and be crucified. So, and you yourself are someone who can speak up. So what do you think, how hard is the situation now? Can you be really honest? Can you speak up in a political, social issues without fear? Thank you.
I think honestly, I think like most topics that were taboo and kind of divided are now issues on race and gender equality, and even stuff that's more specific like climate change. There's no the opposing opinions against those are really unsubjective. Like people think it's either like a right or wrong issue. I think that because of that polarized climate, it's a lot easier to stand with people that feel the same way as you, and that it feels very my politics feel very unpolitical. They just feel really self-sustainable and nice. And so it's like it doesn't feel subversive or crazy. It feels like incredibly imperative and urgent. And I'm not saying that there's not like a, you know, that because of like how opposed certain sides are, there's not kind of scary, but I feel very supported by, you know, the side that I fall on. I don't know how it was then. I can't speak to that, but like, no, I'm not afraid right now. I mean, like, yeah, no.
We have a question right in the front and then some in the back and behind the camera.
I was very interested how much research did you on which data and information did you gather out of the investigation that were done about Seberg, because I've read something when I was 15 about it, and I thought, oh, maybe I have new information with the movie. So that is still a little bit mysterious. Can you tell us something about that?
I mean, I certainly read every single thing that was available, including there's several biographies from the 70s and 80s. There's a book called Neutralized that is specifically about the FBI and has a lot of what happened with Jean and the COINTELPRO, and has many of the dossiers in that. And interestingly enough, she's sort of become a fictional figure as well. Those biographies contradict each other quite a lot, even about the circumstances of the funeral of Nina. There's various different things on that. There's the book of her husband, Romain Gary, wrote the book Chien Blanc, The White Dog, which was then made into a movie, which is totally about this period. It's about him as the husband while his wife is having affairs with activists. He writes a book about that experience and them trying to raise this racist dog in the house. So he writes a book, him dealing with the experience that we slightly touch on in the movie, of being the man while that was going on. He writes a book about that. When she's in Mexico, she has the relationship with the young student activists, Carlos Navarro, who is apparently the father of the child. She also has an affair with the novelist Carlos Fuentes, and he writes a book about her where she's called Diana Soren, but it's basically her. So there's all this other stuff to go into where she's a fictional character, including then her own movies, and we studied them, and I think Kristen was talking about this earlier, but particularly interesting, I think, for our subject in the film, and particularly for her descent into a kind of paranoia and almost a kind of madness is the Philippe Garrel film Les Hautes Solitudes, where he films her and Nico and several actresses separately in their apartments, and it's insufferable, painfully private, and it takes place in the mid-70s after this, showing the effects of this movie. So there was a lot to absorb. The writers had already taken quite a lot of that, and they would, in a way, I saw how they would take scraps of information. For instance, that she said apparently in one biography, it says she said at a party, oh, it's very similar, it's all the same, isn't it, what's happening in Vietnam and racism in America. There's so few political statements that she said. Interesting in terms of what you were saying about her being destroyed for speaking out. She's almost destroyed for what she does in private, for her alliances, for her friendships.
I was going to say the same thing. She didn't make overt statements. She was just supporting black nationalist groups that just, she was just contributing money. She was not standing on a soapbox screaming at everyone.
And so she's destroyed for what happens in private too, as part of this, what Hakim calls, white America's war on black America. She's caught in the crossfire of that. So there was a lot to draw on and to sort of sew between, while at the same time being aware that we weren't trying to make a definitive biopic. There's so much more story to be told in her story, in Romain's story, in the story of the Hakim Jamal and the civil rights movement. There's so many other things, but we're able to draw on that. We also wove in COINTELPRO documents, so the documents that she's reading in the bar in Paris at the end and that are printed out in the course of the movie are documents that are available publicly. So we tried to weave in the speculative side of things with the kind of with the facts we knew. There's a lot. You don't. So we use the facts. We use what we do know about what happened to her, and what we know to be the tactics used by COINTELPRO in various other publicly documented cases, as well as her. Like I said, those documents are real, but the Jack character is a fictional character. All of them are fictional characters. There is no information about the people who actually did this by its nature. It's extremely shadowy.
Yeah, they were anonymous for a reason. You know what I mean? Like they were this faceless, oppressive. Yeah.
Blue shirt, the camera? Yes.
it's kind of a topic which I would like to ask you because I'm doing a documentary about the growing influence of Netflix and the other streaming companies coming to the market. How does this influence the industry, in your opinion, and also maybe your work?
I have absolutely no idea.
This film's getting a traditional theatrical.
It is getting a traditional theatrical release, but via Amazon Studios. So I guess the film is exactly on the borderline of that question. I felt really Netflix acquired this movie while it was in post-production. Amazon Studios acquired this movie while it was. Amazon Studios acquired this movie while it was in post-production, and they've been. I feel that they're a kind of wonderful home for filmmakers. Ted Hope and his team there were really supportive, and I feel that they are supporting independent filmmaking. At the same time, I want to see the movies I make released on a big screen. I want audiences to be able to go to them, sit in the dark, and watch dreams together in the dark. That to me is the place of cinema, and I get nervous about that collapsing, and as a filmmaker I would get nervous about the work being made being lost on a theatrical release. I love, on the other hand, with those streaming platforms and with new streaming platforms like Criterion, the absolute availability of cinema history at every moment, and I hope that leads to where the Cinematheque would maybe be once a month if you wanted to go and watch an early Ingmar Bergman film. Now you can click on Criterion and see that, or through Amazon or Netflix find other films. And I hope that leads to an even more adventurous, cine-literate generation of filmmakers who will still get to see their films and have audience watch their films on the biggest screens possible.
And Kristen, with your work, do you prefer people watch it on a big screen?
Yeah, of course. But at the same time, I know for a fact that without those streaming sites, that so many people wouldn't be able to see the films that we've worked hard to make. Yeah, so it's. I mean, I honestly, just not to just piggyback on that, but I feel really similarly. I just don't really know the inner workings of how it's all gonna. I can't really speak to. Like how to have an opinion about those things. I want as many people to be able to access the movies that we make. But then at the same time, I love the sort of niche aspect of people that are obsessively consuming films, being allowed to watch them on a big screen. So it's like, however that can balance itself, I have no answers for that. But yeah, of course, that's what it's.
Yeah, I think Amazon is doing that balance.
Yeah.
People that kind of understand the value of that theatrical experience and then letting people see it. Okay. There's the green jumper.
Thank you. I have a question concerning the relationship between Seberg and the Black Panther movement, which was, of course, at the time a very big issue because they advocated violence. And in the movie, Seberg comes across, for me, incredibly naive, in the sense that she, first of all, she stumbles into this relationship, which is understandable, but not knowing what the Black Panther movement seemed to be, especially 2/3 of the movie, she's asking, well, who could be watching or something like this? I think if she had been reading the newspapers, just watch the main news, she would know that the Black Panther movement was a big issue. And of course, Mr. Hoover was also well known at the time already because of other scandals. So is that the wrong impression I'm having, that she was pretty naive, or did you intend that?
I think so two things. The movie concentrates primarily on her relationship with Hakim Jamal, who is an associate of the Black Panthers and not typically, he's not actually a Panther in the course of the movie, although it shows her associations with Bobby Seale and that she's funding the Panthers as Jean did. But out of several relationships that she had across this period, also several affairs that she had across this period with black activists, it concentrates on the romance with Hakim Jamal, partly because in looking back at both of their lives, this seemed something that both of them held very dearly, and that was whether it had any future or not, who knows, but is destroyed as part of the war against them. In the first half of the movie, in a way, she is shown as kind of naive. And in the first half of the movie, her idealism is clear, but it's not terribly articulate, quite deliberately. it's passionate and wide-eyed, and it's mixed up with the romantic affair with Hakim. But he, for instance, at one point warns her. He says, "You're playing with fire," and in the very next scene, the affair has been played, as was a COINTELPRO tactic. The affair has been played down the telephone to Dorothy Jamal, his wife, and that relationship is exposed. That's a kind of first missile fired by the FBI. And in the next scene, she says, Dorothy confronts her and says, "You're a tourist." And I want, at that moment, there's a kind of shock in Jean's eyes. She's reeling, but it's as if the first veil of her naivety has been torn away. Both her naivety in terms of what you touched on, that she might be a target of surveillance herself, but also her naivety in a way about the gap between her own life and the lives that she's wanting to be involved in helping make change with. And over the next part of the movie, effectively after that point, if we watch it, I think in the first half with her naivety, we see the kind of hands of the state coming around her neck. We see her swimming deeper and deeper out to sea. And in the next part of the movie, those hands tighten and she's pulled under. And they're kind of gradually destroyed by that machinery. So that naivety is kind of quite deliberate in the first half.
And we have time for one more question, so we'll go right there.
Thank you. In the movie, Jean says that she wants movies which matter and not some Western come. And she wants to change the world by the movies. So, Kristen, do you agree with this? Do you want to change the world with movies? Do you want to be in movies about climate change or LGBTQ issues?
Specifically that.
Can you stop climate change?
I would really prefer to be in movies about absolutely nothing. Yeah, of course. The reach is so profound. It's been my sort of sole source of expansive connection in my life, and I've seen the effects of it. In a really individualized way. So yeah, of course. I mean, I guess it's kind of a boring answer, but yeah, I don't want to make movies about nothing. And just about the last, not to bring up this thing again, but the idea that she was naively and sort of idealistically supporting a group that, definitely used violence in a way that she probably wouldn't completely agree with. She was not being attacked for naively supporting violence. She was being attacked for supporting people that threatened them, and the way that they repurposed information in a really violent way, and in a really dishonest way, totally uprooted all of her intention. Her intention was literally to even the playing field and acknowledge unfair treatment of citizens of our country, and so that was a threat that they wanted to dismantle from the inside in a dishonest way. So yeah, sure, she was naive in the to even the playing field and acknowledge unfair treatment of citizens of our country. And so that was a threat that they wanted to dismantle from the inside in a dishonest way. So yeah, sure, she was naive in the face of that, but who wouldn't be? That would be. It's such a insanely complex and divisively, intentionally confusing subject. People keep you in the dark in order to make your sort of bare truths seem stupid. And really, they weren't. I mean, sure, it was really hard to substantiate her argument for people being treated fairly. I don't know. So
I think it's a really good point. Just to come back to that too, joining the NAACP at age 14 was not naive. It was
the purest intention.
Yeah, gesture of pure solidarity, as was her kind of belief in what the Panthers also stood for against police violence, and as the kind of revolution is the hope of the hopeless. Like
she never saw she never saw her actual white brothers being treated the way that she saw people of color being treated, and that's something to speak up to. That's not naive or idealistic at all. It's just that when it's like sort of redesigned as to seem silly, that's the oppressive other side of things, just dismantling an argument that is very pure.
And what the movie also then chooses to concentrate on, or to highlight, is her giving funds to Hakim's and Dorothy's Montessori school.
Which is not the Black Panthers at all.
So, so also for those community building exercises, she becomes the target of the FBI. And what I wanted to concentrate on most is to show that the FBI's motives from Hoover down are racist in their motivation.
They're not protecting our country from violence by attacking Gene Seberg for being a part of the NAACP.
I'm sorry we don't have time for all the questions, but thank you for bringing Gene's story into the screen so we can see it. Thank you so much for being here in Zurich. Enjoy your green carpet. Congrats on your Golden Eye Award.
Thank you.
Enjoy every minute. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have to play the level where you get the little gun tonight.
Yeah.